Hey, what's up, guys? It's my first time trying a live stream, and I'm just gonna kind of treat this like a regular YouTube video because I think I can upload it afterwards as a YouTube video. So I put together like a bunch of questions and comments that people ask me throughout like my various YouTube videos. Oh, hey, somebody just joined the room. Um, hey, I happy Saturday. And I just like got a bunch of questions that I was asked on like my post and also like through private Instagram messages. And I'm just going to answer them and then upload this after. So, first question is, what is the best first language to learn to become a full stack developer? So this is like pretty it's like pretty opinionated question, but I think that Python and like JavaScript are like really safe, good languages to learn for becoming a good full stack developer. Firstly, like my first language was C, just because I learned it in college. But Python is like useful for everything in the back end, and then JavaScript is very useful for like creating front end frameworks or using front end frameworks like React and Angular. So if you know JavaScript, you can also use in the backend. So that makes it a really safe language to use. So I recommend like Python or JavaScript. They're also easy to learn because like the syntax is so simple. You could like learn Python in a weekend if you know any other language. So definitely recommend learning either one of those. And then as you get better or like as you get more proficient, recommend learning like a more solid backend language like Java or C++, because like if you want to write something like higher performance or lower latency, you want to like learn something closer to the metal like C++. Java is like safer. Like a lot of big shops like Amazon use it. I know like a few hedge funds use it, like Two Sigma uses Java, and like I know Citadel uses Java. So um, definitely like later on learn something like hardcore like Java, but just to get the job done, you can probably make a pretty good application with JavaScript or Python. So next question, came across your awesome YouTube channel and became interested in your discussion system design problems. May I ask you quick opinion if you think DDIA book is useful for system design interview prep or just focusing on specific problems will be sufficient? So DDIA is designing data intensive applications. And that's like a book that I actually read that with a few of my coworkers in Amazon. We had like a book club that we went over technical problems and like just sort of try to like hone in on our skill set because we were working on like huge distributed systems and also sort of get ready for interviews. I think that DDIA is like a little hardcore personally. I don't really think that my system design interviews got that in depth. I've done like maybe like close to 10 system design interviews so far. And I a lot of them are like sort of to talk through a high level system. And I think the hardest system design interview I got was from Uber. And they asked me to create a relevance engine for search queries, kind of similar to like how Google works. And that was like a very intense problem where I had to do it in like 30 minutes. And that was probably the most in depth I had to go with system design. But you could probably get through it just by doing Grok in the system design interview, and that's like a course online. You can it's like costs like $90, but I bought it for my interview prep, and it was like honestly probably one of the best investments I ever made. But most of the questions I get are sort of like design a brokerage system or like design like Instagram. Um, those kinds of questions are probably more normal. So my next question that I got was I wanted to know if it's true that I don't need a degree or a boot camp to get a fairly high paying job as a junior dev. I'm studying finance at Baruch and TBH. I can't wait until I graduate to make some good money. So the question is, do you need to have a degree or a boot camp? I think that it's easier to get a degree and get a job in software engineering because I think that like having a computer science degree gives you a lot of knowledge that will be useful to sort of use with uh, on the job, because like overall, like when you're working as a programmer, especially in these big companies, um, you'll be like learning a lot of things on the job. And if you're working in those giant systems, like um, a lot of the concepts like trees and graphs will be like relevant to like pick up new technology faster. So overall, like a degree is probably more valuable than a boot camp, just because you have like more exposure to like data structures and you've been doing it for like 4 years. Um, but yeah, overall, like I think a degree is a lot more valuable than a boot camp, but you can get by with a boot camp. I like know a couple people that were that became software engineers at like really well-known companies like Amazon, and like my former coworker, he got a job at a FANG just by going through a boot camp. He had a finance degree before that. So I think that definitely helped because he was like doing something like quantitative. But I don't think you need a degree to get a job as a software engineer. You just have to like know how to code and like really know how to hustle and sell yourself during the interviews. Um, so next question is like, how do you answer this behavioral question? What is the hardest problem at work that you have solved? That's like I think that's a softball question personally. Whenever I get those questions, it's like more of an opportunity to sell yourself. So a lot of times I talk about the most complicated system that I had and I've ever worked on. And I think it can be complicated in algorithms, distributed systems, or just like leadership, and you really should like hone in on like what you want to focus on. So typically I like hone in on distributed systems. So I talk about like the projects I worked at Amazon where like I had like I was working between like 6 or 7 different systems at the same time, or like when I'm working at Google, which like is a crazy like distributed system that's hosted on like thousands of hosts. So I talk about like how complex that is, and then I talk about the problems that I had to face, like maybe it was bottlenecks issues, or like maybe there was like a race condition and that was like really hard to debug. And then I talk about how I went through the steps of debugging it and like what led to the eventual outcome. Like questions like these are sort of formatted in a way that like you're meant to use STAR to answer them, which is like situation, task, action, result. So you just want to like structure your experience and like really try to impress the interviewer just by like talking about all the crazy work that you did and all these hard problems that you solved by doing that problem or working with that system. So next question is, what are the categories of hardest problems software engineers would encounter? So hardness is like really relative to like the problem you're trying to solve. Like if you're doing like if you're a hardcore backend engineer, like the problems you're going to be solving are like, how do I scale this system without like, or like how do I like deal with these like space constraints, or like how do I deal with these like memory constraints? And like that's very different than maybe like a front end software engineer where like you're dealing with like front end issues, or like you're dealing with marketing issues, like how do I scale this product, or like how do I serve like this like these huge amounts of users. So I mean like hard problems are like ranged depending on your job. And also there's like range of people that are like in research who are solving problems that nobody ever heard about before. Like the people working on generative AI, that's like those are very different problems. So I think it depends on the domain, but like I think the hardest problems for people in like new fields like generative AI or research are probably a lot more unknown, or like even harder than people working on like systems like backends or like launching apps. So it really, I think the hardest problems are the problems at scale, or like scaling a system to cover like billions of users. That's a hard problem. Like that's, you can start talking about situations where you had to like distribute workload, you had to do like load balancing, you had to like break apart your system to work along multiple hosts, and those are like all things you can use to like talk about in your interview. If you don't have those experiences, and if you haven't worked at a large company, maybe talk about like how you solved a really hard algorithmic problem, or like how you like figured out how to like save resources. Those are hard problems too. So hard problems are like really relative to like your experience level and like the places that you've worked, as well as the systems that you've like worked on. Like any problem can be hard. It's really like a lot of factors include like maybe like the way it was set up, maybe the system was set up in a really bad way and you had to do a huge refactoring job. That's a hard problem too. And if like the other person is like has experience at who's interviewing you, um if they have experience, they'll probably understand that. So next question is, everyone's always talking about overcoming imposter syndrome. I think I think that was a response to a question. So do you think smaller companies are salivating over hiring the recently laid off paying engineers? Or are they careful with hiring them because it may be hard to retain them after they join? I think that's like I think that like both are happening. I have like a personal anecdote where like I had a friend who was laid off from like a Bitcoin hedge fund, and he was job hunting for like maybe like 4 months, and he was having a really hard time. Like a lot of companies weren't hiring, and he was only getting like first or second round interviews. And for the on-sites that he went through, they ended up taking a candidate who had like more experience just because he can get them for the same price. And he eventually got like a healthcare company, but they paid him like a fraction of what they were paying him before. So he was taking like maybe a 25% pay cut by joining that healthcare company, but he was getting a job. And I remember I was getting dinner with him, and he straight up told me that I'm only here until a better offer comes around. So I think that like companies are like very interested in hiring like Fang level engineers for a discount, but like I don't think that like I think like the Fang engineers are thinking like this is just this temporary thing. I'm like gonna move on the moment like the job market gets better and the moment I can find a better job. So both things are happening, but like the companies are very likely just trying to find cheap talent, but the candidates are the ones that are going to leave. I don't think the companies are going to are thinking that right now, because like the companies are thinking like we're just going to pay people what it takes to get them to stay. And right now the job market's really shitty. So paying people like minimum raises and like stuff like that, that's like all the stuff that's happening in finance right now. Like people are getting really really bad raises and bonuses just because like people lost a lot, like the banks lost a lot of money, and it doesn't take a lot of money to retain somebody right now. Like everybody I know who's searching for a job has been going for like multiple months, like 5 or 6 months, with barely getting interviews, barely getting any like interest. So the job market, as a matter of fact, is shitty. And the right now the market rate to retain people is like whatever. If you're paying them something, like you'll probably retain them. So I don't think that that's going to change for another like 6 months, 3 to 6 months. So I think that they're comfortable until then. But the engineers, if you're talented, you're going to leave the moment a better offer comes around. The job market just does that. It always fixes itself. If you're like willing to interview, you'll get your market rate if the market improves. Like that's what happened with me. Like I interviewed the first time I interviewed, like I got Amazon, our market was really bad, nobody was hiring. I interviewed again a year and a half later, I got Google, and I got the pay that I like felt like I should have got the first time. And the market corrects itself. I think that's just the way it is. Um the next question is, what is the number one thing that you see junior engineers do wrong, and what advice would you give them? So this is a really good question. The number one thing I think junior engineers do wrong is not learn it, taking every opportunity to learn. I think that, and this is something that somebody else told me that really like made everything click. Like junior engineers for a lot of companies are bets. Like you don't really become productive or break even until you're like a mid-level engineer, because junior engineers require a lot of mentoring, and that means that you're taking time away from like a junior or senior engineer whose time is like if we just become like go to the numbers, like like mid-level and senior level engineers make like 2x or 1.5 to 2x more than junior engineers. So you're taking time away from like other engineers to like help help you learn, and help, like their job is to teach you. So your job as a junior engineer is really to just soak up as much information as possible and try to become autonomous in your work. Like the difference between a junior, like an L3 and an L4, or at like Facebook, and or like an L4 and an L5 at like Amazon, is just like how confident and autonomous can you be when you do your projects? Can you like finish a project with minimal input from somebody else? And if you can do that and you can deliver it, then you should be an L5 or like a mid-level engineer. All the leveling is different for companies, but like that's the biggest difference between a junior and a mid. And during the first 2 years of junior, you can get promoted from junior to mid in like a year or two if you really hustle. But but all you have to do is just take on every project and try to do every one autonomously. Just do it. If you can finish it by yourself, then you should be operating as a mid-level engineer. You should be paid as so. So just take every opportunity to learn. That's my advice. Um, can next question is, can you share your interview prep journey? Also, thanks for your videos. Yeah, so what I do for interview prep is mostly lead code. As and like early junior, like the early level junior interviews, it's mostly lead code. You just have to like grind it. It's just the way it is. And I mostly do like maybe one or two problems at night. And I watch like a data structures video, like just to like refresh my knowledge. Um, Once like mid-level and senior, like the behavioral questions become a little bit more like become more of an emphasis. So like I practice like talking about my project experience, and then I also do a few system design interview preps. I asked a friend to like interview me and hear feedback because a lot of the times like it's not just like how you code, but it's also like can you explain your code and can you um, talk about it confidently. So I recommend just like getting like having a friend interview me was like a really good tip. But yeah, I just do that for about like a month or two, and then once I feel confident, I do a few practice interviews, and if those practice interviews go well, then I start applying to the company I'm really interested in. I usually set like my companies as like safeties, realistics, and then reaches. That's like kind of similar to applying to college. I think of like applying for jobs similar to that. So like I might apply to like a company where I'm kind of interested, but I'm not like really like maybe a few startups just like get me warmed up. And then like once I feel confident, like I apply to the Fanes and like the Ubers or like the Lyfts and like I try for those. And then like at the same time, I apply for the reaches, like maybe like some really like hard to get into startup or like maybe like some like high-end finance firms. Like I apply to those as like reaches. Like I don't think that it won't be realistic for me to get that, but like I have to try because like I'm only on the market so few times. So that's like sort of my philosophy. And then I just there's a few questions about like average salary. So I recommend for these like um definitely like go to Levels FYI. That's like probably the Bible of software engineering salaries. There's so much crowdsourced data, you'll kind of know like what the real salaries are. And just go there and just search your area. If and you can see the median salaries and you can see all the company salaries. Like you can get like a very holistic view of the labor market for software engineering from Levels FYI. And like it's better than Indeed and other like sources like Glassdoor because they actually like take into account that a lot of software engineering salaries are bonus based and equity based, and they'll let you like add that so you get more realistic data of what your offer package is. I also use that for negotiation. Like for example, like when I was negotiating with Amazon and Google, like I took the salary data for like the level I was applying to, and then I took like I like placed myself at like about like 75 or 80th percentile, and then I asked for that number, and then that gave me like a pretty realistic gauge of like what I should be asking for. So also like something I should mention too is like when you get the job, that's probably the best time for you to set your salary. It's really hard to like change your salary after you get into the job because then you're like at the mercy of raises and like performance. And you might get like maybe a 5% raise, but that is like it's gonna take you a lot more years of getting 5% raises. And if you just come in and let's say like I want this number, and it might be like 30% higher than what you really asked for, but what you really want. But if you get it, that like saves you 6 years of just grinding and like getting like you would need like really good performance in order to get that 5% raise. So you'd be like working at like top performance for like 6 years to get like the salary that you would have gotten if you just asked for it. So definitely like my recommendation for these companies is just like come in with the number that you want that you'll be happy with. And like if they'll like maybe like counter offer with a lower number, but that'll save you so much time and just performance reviews and like years of just grinding. Um, so that's all the questions. If there's two people left on the stream, if you guys like have any questions, like throw them in the chat. Otherwise, I'm gonna log off and enjoy my Saturday night. Oh, well, yeah, silence is golden. I'm gonna log off unless anybody else has questions. Post in the chat. All right, it's going once, going twice. Guys are a quiet crowd. Um, talk about. See what else there is. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else here. All right, I'm gonna log off. Peace out, guys.